Appreciate you guys coming out today. And I don't know why this has been something that's kind of near and dear to me. I think as what I'm seeing out kind of nationally is this glamorization of entrepreneurship. And I like to tell people there's nothing glamorous about being an entrepreneur.
Oh, come
And for a guy who's down the hall and has seen Jerry kind of grind it out, basically, I'm sure he can speak to this. And basically, who's exited, a couple of companies and been very successful. So Jerry's basically, I didn't realize, and the nice thing is when I get to introduce people, I realize that I didn't know more. I know now more about Jerry than I did previously. Studied naval architecture at MIT and Stevens Tech in New Jersey, Hoboken, New Jersey.
Right.
And I say Stevens Tech. I attended Stevens Tech for 2 days and decided I couldn't stand the cold, and came running back to Charleston, South Carolina. That's why Stevens, way back when it was a tough place to.
Yeah, it was pretty tough.
It was,
You had all the
I do
herbs
remember
and
that
stuff.
basically it smelled of coffee because Maxwell has that roasting plant.
Exactly right.
Began his career as a civil engineer and with a marine construction company, and I'll kind of bypass some of the. But more importantly, basically, we can all think of this. So Jerry's the co-founder of Blue Rhino, which is the cylinder exchange, the propane cylinder, and everybody thinks it's that's the ultimate consumer thing, right? The convenience. And a company called National Packaging Solutions had unbelievable experience from being an engineer to being involved in leadership to being involved in turnarounds, but then there's also been a principal in a private equity and venture firm. And so for somebody who's gone and raised money and just the brutal slog, he's been on both sides of it. So I'm curious to hear, get some of those thoughts. And this I didn't know. Along the way, like he's not busy enough, goes and gets an MBA from the University of Chicago. And while all this was going on, went out and patented some technology that is today the eyesight technology, which is now HeatWorks. So what I think is, I can't think of a better person to talk about all the facets of entrepreneurship, and just from being down the hall, I can see it's been everything from branding to personnel to finance. He's touched them all that you could possibly think of. So without further ado, we're really, really happy to have you here, and I appreciate
Great. Thanks,
and he's one of our own, which is even better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, I'm glad to be here, and thanks for coming. I want to thank Ernest for lots of things, not only for asking me to speak, because I like to talk a lot, but really what he's done, the innovation community, no matter where it is, really needs a place like this, and someone like Ernest to drive it forward. And I know he's had his own struggles, but will ultimately continue to prevail and provide a place for people like us, and for many of you around here, that we can, it's easy to come in, it's easy to work, it's a great collaborative atmosphere. If we just had one more men's room, it'd be perfect, but we walked to the other building. So anyway, thanks a lot. So I'm going to talk for a little bit, and then I'm going to have some Q&A. So this is an hour, right? I think okay, great. So this is Ernest's topic, but I'm happy to talk about it. So you want to be an entrepreneur. So I think it has to start with the sort of the mindset of people, and this is probably one of the best quotes. Some of the older people understand who Kirk Vonnegut was, but most of the other people have. But pretty interesting writer from the 60s and the 70s. But I want to stand as close to the edge as I can without going over, because out there you can see all kinds of things you can't see from the center. And it's just a different perspective on life. Typical entrepreneurs are probably the ones that sat in the back of the classroom, were always in trouble and detention, and didn't do all that well in class, and maybe didn't even finish high school or college. But it's a different mindset. I have to say that I did finish some college. So what is an entrepreneur? So let's sort of go through the corporate finance or Harvard Business School type thing. Is it an entrepreneur plus capital plus products or services and customers equals a business, right? So this here is what all businesses do every day. The question is how do you get, what do you need to start a business? And you need entrepreneur. And of course, we can speak about it in the plural as well. Sometimes it's better to have a team to start a business than one person. Although I can tell you from experience here, sometimes the visions can be confusing and cause some problems. So what is the entrepreneurial process? So I think that there's two types of entrepreneurs. There are sort of blue sky entrepreneurs, kind of like Alvadar, eBay, and Zuckerberg and Facebook. They thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this? I think the other kind of an entrepreneur is sort of what I tend to be, is sort of an event-driven entrepreneur, which is like, there's a problem here, how can I solve that problem? This is nagging me. And so actually one of the things that I do, because I'm a little bit on the nerdy side, is try and think about when something irks me, it's like, what is a better way to do that? Now, obviously, I don't take a lot of that stuff to fruition, but it sort of takes my mind off some of the things I'm working with HeatWorks today. So I think that there's two ways to categorize that, and so the first one is someone who's really much more creative than I am, and the other one is more of a problem solver, which is I am. So the Blue Rhino story, I'll just sort of weave some of that in and out if I can. So in 1995, I was cooking on the gas grill outside with 20-pound propane cylinder that I'd gotten refilled at Suburban Fuels in Mount Pleasant, and one of the things about those cylinders is the only way you can tell how much fuel is in them is if you weigh them. There's no pressure vessel because it's equal pressure. I know you don't want to get the technical side of it. So, and no one wants to take their grill and put their gas cylinder and put it on a scale. However, I will tell you that if you want to know how much is in there, there's a collar on the outside of it, and there's a number stamped that says TW, which is tare weight, and it'll usually be like 18.5. And that's how much the cylinder weighs empty. So if you put on your bathroom scale, and the most they can put in there is like 18 pounds now. So if you have 27 pounds, your cylinder's half full. So there you go. The other way to do it, which isn't necessarily the safest way to do it, is actually to spray, is to put hot water on it and then spray it with cold water, and the level of the propane in there will condense on the outside and you can visually see, but that takes a little more time. Better to get the scale up. So anyway, I was out there cooking. We had 3 couples over, all who were new, friends of ours, and so it was one of those dinners you don't want to screw up. So I'm sitting there having a couple beers with the guys looking at the steaks. All of a sudden they go, "Hey, steaks, I think the flame's out." Didn't have a spare cylinder. Didn't want to get the spousal unit cranked up, so fortunately one of these guys lived next door, and he had an extra cylinder, so we swapped the thing out. And I'm like, boy, I really dodged a bullet on that. And I thought, why do you have to go get the cylinder filled up at a place that's only open from 9 to 12 on Saturdays and from 9 to 5 during the weekday? I mean, that's a problem to do it, and it weighs 40 pounds when it's full, and so it's hard to go get the wife or someone else to do it. It just becomes this problem. So anyway, the idea was, why can't you just exchange them? And so that alone was a pretty good idea. But one of the things about success in business is the more, to a certain point, parties you can get involved in your success, the better chances of success are. So we wanted to go to, so the idea was, so I had another guy, I met a guy who was in the propane industry, so he had the licenses and stuff like that, which is not that hard to get, but it's nice to have some insider. So he said, why don't we get together and use some of your assets and my ideas, and we'll make this thing happen. We started up, we're in the Winston-Salem area. So we decided, we wanted to target big box retailers because they're always looking for something destination, want people to come to them as a destination. But the second is we spent some time thinking about who actually sells products, complementary products to people who would be customers of ours. Okay, well, gas grill manufacturers. So I go talk to the charbroil guys in Georgia, and it turns out their frustration has been they had been working with pressure from the big box retailers to get a gas grill for under $100 so it could be an impulse purchase. And so my response was, well, that's great, but an impulse purchase you can go use, right? You can't use this thing unless you go fill your tank up, and if you buy it at Home Depot at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, you can go to Suburban or Blue Flame and get it filled. So we got them in the loop to help create pull through the Home Depot, which was our launch customer. And at the time, Depot was the 4th largest grill seller in the United States. And so that was a good opportunity to get the Depot and say, look, you can sell more grills, you get more people coming here, you can get more women to come here, because Depot has typically only been a male-oriented, where Lowe's is more focused on females. Just, when you walk in the store, it's just the whole image is different. You can drive more female traffic and all the rest. And so, okay, let's go try it. So we put us in 220 stores in the Southeast, and it was such a huge hit that we were in 4,000 retail locations in 12 months. Now, each one of those had to be permitted. Each one had individually. There was this person that I never knew existed called a fire marshal, which is different than the fire chief. And this is like, the sheriff who has to give you permits. And most of these guys know nothing about propane. So you get all this education. So then we ended up with all these peripheral things that we built this routing package. This has been done 20 years ago, so not state-of-the-art PCs and stuff. Routing package, so we could optimize the gross margin per stop. So if you think about it, right now there's a 36-cylinder rack in there, and ideally, in order to maximize the gross margin dollars per stop, you want to go there as this guy is exchanging the last cylinder, right? So you're going to drop off 36. because your delivery cost is the same. If you drop off one, you've actually lost money in the stop. So we developed this program, which we ended up selling actually to Ryder Systems. It's now called part of Ryder Router, to optimize it, to route optimization. And then we were downloading point of sale data and things like that to try and figure out where to get there. So it was really a great, program. But that is, in my mind, the definition of the event-driven process. So innovation is typically what entrepreneurs do. It's an invention, but it has to be commercialized, otherwise it isn't innovative. Why do you want to do it? This sort of gets back to the Kirk Vonnegut slide, is I have been involved in lots of different things. I probably haven't had a job for more than, well, actually when I was in the dredging marine construction business, I was in the same company for about 8 years, but probably 2 or 3 years at a time. And so maybe I'm impatient, maybe I'm ADD, who knows, but it takes a certain mindset. Someone who wants to go to work every day and mow the lawn is not, everybody has to have their lawn mowed, is not necessarily someone who wants to be an entrepreneur. And again, maybe we can get more through this in the Q&A. Benefits are, if it really suits your aptitudes and what you want to do, there's nothing else I would rather do. I've had an opportunity to run a lot of other companies and just never got the flame going. The risks are pretty significant. Failure, it's hard to raise money unless you have a lot of your own money in there. And a lot is a relative term for all the investors that are out there. Sometimes it's all of it, including your IRA. You lose a lot of sleep, you can lose a lot of weight, you can pick up a lot of peripheral bad habits. But the realities of it is that if it's what you want to do, you'll be really frustrated if you don't do it. So steps in the process. So what is the idea and what is the compelling pain points is it solving? It has to be compelling. Otherwise, it's very hard to commercialize. So there's 5 lenses we tend to think about, and this is all stuff that I've gathered over the years, chestnuts, if you will. So, you have to have people on your team, technology, which can be really primitive or really complex. Right now, we've got a very complex product. What's the competition, what's the market size, and what's the business model? So our competition is, we technically don't have any competition. The product that we have now is the world's first electronic water heater. This is the first product. The technology, which is what the patents are around, and by the way, we just got a patent in China last week, which is pretty hard to do. They don't give those out to American companies very often. But of course, the whole application was on the internet probably 2 years ago. So the technology that we have is we heat water using controlled bursts of electricity. We use the electrical resistance of the water itself, and we excite by passing energy through the water molecules move faster. The energy transfers from being electricity into kinetic energy. The faster the water molecules move, the faster they hit each other with more kinetic energy. They give them kinetic energy in the form of heat. So you go, wow, that's really cool. How do I put that into my head? Well, basically think about rubbing your hands like this. Slowly, you don't really generate any heat. The faster you rub your hands, the more you generate heat. That's essentially what's happening inside the water. So it's 100% efficient. It heats water instantly. It stops heating water instantly, which I'll talk about in a minute about some of the value opportunities there. There's no scaling. The tanks are all electric. Actually, Jack, would you mind? I meant to bring the demo unit in there. Would you mind grabbing one out of the office so you can at least see it? Some of you's probably seen it anyway. But it's really differentiated technology. So we're going to have it in coffee makers. It'll go in everything from coffee makers to heating elements for dishwashers and clothes washers, to large desalination plants. We've got a project we're working on. California, for example, generates about 20% more electricity during the day than they need, and they really can't sell it for very much because everybody in that time zone. So this is a HeatWorks Model 1. This is around here, this is a whole house water heater. But it's all engineered plastic, so it doesn't leak. And the water goes in, cold water goes in, hot water goes out there, and put a few wires in there for power. But the next model, for example, is going to be probably half the size, twice the power, and will be so cheap you won't believe it. But I don't want to tell you how cheap it's going to be. But you won't believe it. So that's what the technology is. And so one of our challenges is how do we focus on what products and markets and things, and we're going to talk about beachhead markets and stuff like that in the next bullet point. But you have to have really compelling technology, and ideally you've got a lot of IP, a lot of intellectual property and patents wrapped around it. And we have patents now in, I think about, if you count the European Union as one, we have patents in about pretty much every market we want to be in or pending, but I think about close to 30 companies, or 30 countries. So then we think about competition. So technically we don't have any competition because no one heats water like we do, right? But still, you know, when you go into an industry like residential and light commercial water heating, we have competitors. A.O. Smith is 50% of the market. Rheem is 30% of the market. Bradford White is 15% of the market. And the products, you know, you have gas tank, electric tank, gas tankless, which like Nords and Rhino, some of you might be familiar with those, run off propane or natural gas, and then electric tankless. We have a lot of competition, established distribution systems, which we're actually circumventing because we think that the distribution model is essentially broken in the plumbing industry. And then the market size. So the market size in the U.S. is about $4 to $5 billion a year. Globally, it's north of $30 billion. And we're going to talk a little about fundraising. One of my favorite stories in raising the last round of capital, which we closed a couple months ago, was I had a couple of directors from a really well-known venture firm on the West Coast that told me a $30 billion market. Well, that's just not big enough for us, Jerry. And they said, and then another one said that at another meeting and said, you know, we're not really sure that hot water is really important to people. And I wanted to say, so did you take a shower this morning? Cold water? If you didn't, maybe that's what that smell is. But never burn a bridge, right? And then the business model. So for us, the technology is so compelling that we decided that we don't have to manufacture to make a reasonable return on our investment. You know, we have Flextronics making them for us up in Columbia, South Carolina. Flex is the second largest electronic contract manufacturer in the world. So they're going to make some margin points off it, but would it be nice to have it? Yes, but it's a lot better to be able to outsource that stuff because arguably, you know, they can buy resistors and chips and things like that cheaper than we can, arguably. So those are the 5 things you got to think about if you want to frame. Once you get the idea, what are the pain points? So how do I frame this relative to those? And then you do some market analysis. Beachhead customers in each one of your market segments. If you have segments, you need a beachhead customer, which is the one ideally. Not every industry have them, and if you're going direct to consumer, there really are no beachhead customers. But beachhead customer is one that ideally is going to be your launch customer. That's going to have name recognition within the industry. You can use them as a reference, and is obviously going to buy enough products and give you enough feedback where you can work on continuous product improvement. And then the feasibility, you know, the analysis and the differentiation, that's more of the math side of it. You know, how do you really, what do the numbers look like, and you know, how do you differentiate yourself from the competition? Because ultimately you have to go to the next step, which is raising capital. So what's in vogue? So what's in vogue today in the venture capital is basically asset-light models, which are essentially apps and software as a service, things like that. It's really, really difficult to raise money in the hardware space these days. We're in the hardware space. We went to over 60 different, had meetings with over 60 different firms. And some of the answers were, yeah, the market's not big enough. Some of them were, you know, we really like energy-saving products. We like new technology, but we don't never invest in anything that has a consumer-facing aspect to it. It's all B2B. And so what's happened is over the years, which is probably a good thing for the investors, is that there's very few general venture capital funds these days. Even ones like Sequoia and Kleiner Perkins and things like that really are down to probably 3 or 4 segments. They're in apps, software as a service. They're only in hardware to the extent that it's follow-on for previous investments, but they're not really doing any new ones. So it's difficult, but that changes. You know, maybe in 2 years, you know, maybe hardware will be back in vogue. Alternate funding methods, you know, so we've heard of Kickstarter, and Indiegogo is actually another one like Kickstarter that's more focused on technology. But we did a Kickstarter campaign a little over 2 years ago and raised about, you know, right? So you're basically pre-selling your product or service, about $485,000, I think. So it worked out pretty well for us. But the problem is that Kickstarter people are very focused on being involved in the process, and so if you're like a day late, you know, you might as well be, you know, if social media were shotguns, you know, I'd be dead several times. So you really got to stretch. The best of Kickstarter and things like that, really a great thing to do, but really stretch your time frames out. Because we had problems with suppliers, I mean, all the kind of stuff that we thought we baked in But that was a challenge for us. We're going to have a new product that we're going to announce probably in about 60 or 90 days, the next generation of this. And we'll probably do a Kickstarter program for that as well, because it's great for a lot of reasons. You get a lot of feedback. You know, you pre-sell the product, which is really what you're trying to do. It's really a capital raising source. But there's other ways to think about raising partners or suppliers. One of the things we did at Blue Rhino, we were growing so quickly, is that we had to raise more money to buy these cylinders and those cages that they go in. And each one of those cost us about, installed about between $2,000 and $3,000, depending on where it was and how many posts you had to put out and stuff like that. But the cylinders were about $1,500 of that. And so when you go to, you do the math, 4,000 locations in a year times $1,500, serious scratch, right? So normally you would go in a growth business, you'd go to a bank. At that time it was like Chemical Bank and Chase Manhattan. And you go to their asset-based lending group where they lend you on inventory and receivables and things like that. And we could show them that we were making money, the trajectory was great, but we needed a lot of money. And they were like, oh yeah, that's great, yeah, we're all interested in this. And then all of a sudden they realized that what they were lending you the money for, in order to make the business model work, they were lending you for brand new cylinders. In order to make the business model work, someone was bringing an old one and exchanging it for a new one. And I mean, Wall Street just shut down in like 3 days. All the banks talking to each other. It was like, no, can't do that. We need to know, we have serial numbers, we need to have our asset tags on every single cylinder. I go, well, that's not going to work. So we're like, well, okay, so now what do we do? And the ventures, and this was really the first big B2C service company that was around there going through the big box channels. I mean, there's all these little channels you got to go through. To slice and dice it as far as the investment philosophy. So it's really hard to find anybody that was, and again, this is 20 years ago, the venture business was a lot different than it is now. So anyway, we decided to go to one of our suppliers. So at that time there were two companies in the propane cylinder space, Worthington Industries, which is a big, large metal bender. They do all kinds of things, from big propane tanks to fuel tanks, basically bending and welding and painting steel. And they had about 90% of the market. They were in the propane cylinder business. And then the other 10% was this guy named Darryl Reschneider in Crossville, Tennessee, who had a family-owned company called Manchester Tank. So, and he was a really kind of obnoxious guy. And he hated Worthington because it was kind of a throwaway business for them. So they were just like killing his profits. And, he's making a little bit of money. He had a much better product. He had a powder-coated tank instead of painted tank. So I went to him, and I knew that he hated Worthington because we were buying some cylinders from him. And I said, look, Darryl, we're going to buy more cylinders than anybody in the industry in the next 3 years because we have to put them into inventory, right? He's like, okay, so what's up with that? And I said, well, he's burning cigarettes all the time. Drinking whiskey at his desk also at 10 a.m. But he's in Tennessee. So I said, we're going to buy these from only one supplier, and we're thinking about going to Worthington. He gets all cranked up and stuff like that. I said, but it could be you. He goes, well, how could it be me? And I said, well, you got to sell them to me at this price, which was a fair price, because we'd done the math on what their conversion costs were and how much steel was in each one and things like that, with a reasonable margin. He goes, at this price, he goes, yeah, okay, but what's the catch? I said, well, you got to give me 270-day payment terms. And the idea was we could make enough money in that 270 days to pay them back. And so that's how we financed the growth of Blue Rhino, was through Darryl Reschneider. And he still has 100% of their business. And they, by the way, Blue Rhino now, 20 years later, has 80% of the market. Wow. It's killing it. And actually, we were in Lowe's the other day because they're one of our customers and saw that they got Supplier of the Year in that segment for 2015. So, cool stuff. Anyway, so lots of interesting ways to fund it, but not applicable to all business. So, of course, ideally you want to launch the product and the service while minimizing the cash burn rate. The cash burn rate is, you really got to think of it almost like, how much am I burning per hour? It can't be per month because you have to keep, and I know my team has heard a lot of that. It's like, look, our burn rate is 10 grand a day, so every day that we don't make the right decision or make a decision that's impacting it is, it's a lot of cash out the door. You have to continually sell. I mean, you're selling all the time. You're selling when you're on airplanes, you're selling, to direct customers, you're selling to influencers of our potential customers. One way to help sell, of course, is exposure through PR. We did 2 years ago, we were selected to go to TechCrunch Disrupt in New York and ended up finishing second, which was a really amazing experience. Does anybody know what disrupt is? Has anybody seen any of the text right? So basically, TechCrunch is, you'll see, it's one of the things you probably should read every day if you're interested in technology. But it's digital, it's like the digital Wall Street Journal. They select, I don't know, from thousands of applicants, 24 teams to go up there and pitch for 3 days in New York, and now they do it in San Francisco, their second year in San Francisco. And the idea is, if you win $50,000 in the Disrupt Cup. And so, but you have to go up there 3 times to interview, or to rehearse. I mean, it's really, TechCrunch is owned by AOL, so it's a big media event for them. It isn't just me standing up and talking like this. So Mike Wachowski, who's our CTO, had been on board about 3 weeks, I think, and said, hey Mike, we're going to TechCrunch. Like, what? So anyway, we ended up doing all this stuff, and it was really great. But it's really A-list judges for the finals. Marissa Meyer from Yahoo was one of the judges, and Fred Wilson from Union Square, and a couple guys from Sequoia, or one guy from Sequoia, and things like that. So great PR. That helped us a lot. Social media is helpful. One of the challenges that we have with social media is, well, really twofold. One of the challenges, we've had some problems with our launch product, and so that hasn't helped us very much. But the other thing is, really, when I talk about, what are we going to focus on? You have to be able to identify with the reader, if you will, of the social media as to why they should even follow you, right? On other water heaters. It's hard to get excited about water heaters because most people think about it as a utility, like turn the lights on, lights go on, open the faucet, hot water goes on. But there's some interesting things we're doing with that to try and make it a better experience. For example, if anybody has any teenage children, the next product's going to be fully connected, and because it heats water instantly and also stops heating water instantly, you can actually tell your family how long they can shower. And if you say you get a 5-minute shower and you just program all this, it takes no time at all. At 4 minutes and 30 seconds, it drops into water a degree every second, and cold water chases them out. So, things like that. So growing the company, dealing with growing pains. So here's one of my personal things. I love people, not so hot on employees, right? So, and I don't want anybody to take that the wrong way. It's just, the selection process is, if you really do a good job, 50% of your hires work out, right? So in many cases, it's better to outsource as much as you can because you can make those changes. Now, anytime you make a change, whether it's outsourced or an employee, it causes some structural issues. But one of the challenges is, especially as an entrepreneur, is trying to figure out when you hire the right people. Because again, you're trying to minimize cash burn, and you've got to hire the right people with the right skill sets, but sometimes you don't need them for more than a couple of months. And so, for example, we hired a great product development firm to help us with the Model 2, not on the technology side, but more on the packaging and things like that. And we only need that skill set for like 2 or 3 months during this process. So why would I go and hire up 16 engineers when I can have these people do it? And there'll be a continuing role for them as well. But personally, what I found out, and it took me probably about 2 or 3 decades to learn this, is the time I know when I need to hire somebody is when the time I'm so frustrated with this task or this issue that I can't stand it. And it's almost like, and it makes you feel guilty. It's like, I can't deal with it anymore. But I'm going to dump it off on somebody else. But you find the right person that wants to do that, right? My office is the first one on the right, and you can tell which desk is mine. It's the one with just junk all over it because of all these projects I'm working on. So we'll take care of that pretty soon. Handling the curveball. So everything happens. Things happen that you have no idea they're going to happen. So, for example, one of the things that's cool about this water heater is it's all electronic, so it auto senses for voltage and cycles. And I know all of you know what that means, but the easy way to think about it, this thing will work anywhere in the world today. It works in Japan, it works in Europe, on different voltages and cycles and things like that. So we're like, this is really cool. It works from 110 to 277 volts. Well, what happens is the more power you put in, the more hot water you get out of it. So what happens is we've driven customer service crazy, ultimately my decision, because we have people that go buy this thing at Lowe's, they plug it into the wall, and they think they're going to get enough hot water for the whole house, but it just doesn't generate enough power. So what we should have done was think about, okay, we should just say, even though it can go to 100 volts, and you can plug it into the wall, that's more like a technology demonstration feature than really something that you want to tell people. We should just tell them it's 220 volts, and you got a hard wire. It would make a lot of difference in the frustration level of our customer service. So curveballs that probably should have thought about, we did it. Key success factors. You need to be an effective visionary communicator because you've got to communicate to everybody, especially in the early stages when you're wearing most of the hats. Salesperson, sell. Leader, you have to be indefatigable. You have to have just a lot of energy. And what's probably most important is you have to have a really strong support structure at home because, there are times when people who you live with can get a little tired of you getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning for 60 days in a row for 2 hours. Kind of messes up their sleep cycle. But ultimately it's all part of the process. So raising capital, let's talk about raising capital real quick. So the best way to think about raising capital, because what you want to do is you want to get as much money as you can without and give up as little of the company as you can, right? You never want to give up control. The only time you want to give up control is when you've already got your money out of the deal. Then you can say, okay, if you want to control it, you can buy it. Basically, why don't you just buy the whole thing instead of 51%? But so the way to think about it is staging and experiments, and this is something I've developed over the years too, is that you raise money to do experiments. You buy experiments, if you will, whether you do it yourself or you have someone else, to produce information. It could be market research surveys. We're doing surveys now for multifamily tenants about would they like more hot water than they already have out of their home. How many people live in apartments, by the way? How many people, do you have all the hot water you could ever use in your life in that apartment?
I don't use much hot water, so I don't know.
Okay.
I think, there's not that many people living in apartments, so.
Yeah, so, but most people, or a lot of people, and this is what the survey is about, don't think they have enough hot water. So there's a version of this called the Model 1X that you can hook up to an existing hot water heater with no more electrical stuff, and it basically doubles the amount of hot water in the tank. So we're doing surveys like that. So that's an experiment. But you buy experiments or start experiments to produce information. You produce that information to make decisions. You make decisions to open or close options. You raise enough cash at each stage to get you that next decision point, plus a comfortable margin, and to deal with its outcomes. So experiments, information gathering, option to abandon, option to renegotiate internally as well as externally, option to pursue, but that is reduces uncertainty and more clearly defines the payoff. And then who you raise it from is, I talked a little bit about that before, is sometimes unclear. Angels are usually a good place to start, but the level of sophistication of angel investors can really vary, and that can be a real problem. Not only from the intelligence or their experience level of the investor, but also from the professionals that they hire to advise them, i.e. attorneys and accountants and stuff like that. And I can tell you, you probably won't believe this, but in this last round of capital, we had an individual, the $5 million we raised is from a venture firm in Boston, didn't want in the deal because his attorneys told him that Yankee money is bad money. It took me a little while to get my arms around that one. What is it again? Anyway, we got past it. So a lot of weird things can happen, but you should always be. We just closed that round probably 8 weeks ago. I don't know if we need another round, but I need to keep thinking about raising money because you never know if you're going to need it. You might find an opportunity to make an acquisition and put the technology into the acquisition. So there's lots of reasons to do that. But staying on top of things like, and that's one of the things I'll talk about is just, if you're interested in fundraising or entrepreneurs, to read TechCrunch, because you just learn a lot from everything that's going on in the industry about who's investing in what and what they like and what they don't like. But this is probably the single hardest part of it, is the raising capital side. So exiting, ideally you're in this because there's an exit. Rarely is in a business you say you want to run for the rest of your life, because time is the enemy of all deals. Whether the deal being the company you start, at some point you get tired of it. I'm not at that point yet, probably won't be for a while. But Blue Rhino was a good example of that. So we got the company up, made a lot of money, took it public, and I'd run a public company before and decided I didn't want to run another public company, and so decided it was a good time to leave. So knowing your exit options, typically I say to people, no matter what you're trying to do, you don't want to get into something unless you have two exit options that are acceptable to you. Obviously getting fired is not one of those. Proper positioning and planning, who are the buyers of a clear and clean process, and avoid auctions. Auctions are never good for anything other than like eBay and stuff like that. Because what happens is, what you want to do, it takes the buyers, potential buyers, get focused on the price and tend to forget about why they're buying the business, the value proposition. It gets down to dollars and cents, which ultimately it does, but you want to try and avoid the auctions, want to try and find the best buyer who's going to, be the best partner, treat your employees the best, whatever the criteria that you have. Who are their buyers is pretty interesting, proper positioning and planning. So one of the things that we're doing here, because it's the right business thing to do, but we also think it's going to have some pretty significant value on the exit, whatever the exit is the existing plumbing wholesale market we think is broken, which is pretty much how all water heaters are sold these days. Distribution in general is not what it used to be 20 years ago, where distributors used to stock pretty much everything that they sold. Now with FedEx and things like that, they don't have to stock as much, and that's okay for their business model. But what it means is that they don't create any pull. They just wait for someone. There's no one out there selling better technologies. No one's selling better water heaters. They're just like, okay, here's the brochures, and when the plumber comes in, the guy takes a brochure, maybe not. And the plumbing industry, for example, plumbers, are very limited continuing education. But you go to the HVAC contractors, which have plumbing and electrical under the roof, heating, ventilating, and air conditioning. They have to take continuing education. So that's our target, is not to go to the plumbers, but to go to the HVACs. Because if you think, I know you're all HVAC experts, but there's been some really amazing changes in HVAC technology, even over the last 5 years. Nest thermostat type thing is one, but variable speed compressors and things like that just make it more efficient and lower the energy cost and things like that. So we believe that a buyer for us will value this new channel that we're delivering, because they're all in wholesale right now and none of them like it. And part of the reason I don't like it is because it's so complex for them. So take the tank water heater guys. I mean, that's a commodity product. They're all the same. So the only way they can create demand is that they have these customer incentive programs. So if you buy A.O. Smith water heaters, you get all these points, and if you get enough points, you get tickets to go to a NASCAR race, and if you get more points than that, then they take your family to Las Vegas and stuff like that. So that's how, and that's the right strategy for a commodity product, is to get buy loyalty. But when you hear how many hundreds of people are involved at some of these large companies, hundreds, just managing these vendor incentive programs, and it's probably north of 5% of sales, which is several $100 million for some of these big companies. But that's the trap that they're in. How do you know when to exit? It's really hard to say that. Ideally you don't want to exit when you can't stand going to work every day. That's obviously too late. I think you've probably heard this before, but if you build a really great company, the opportunities will come to you. And great company means great products / service, great customers. We love all of our customers. Some we love more than others, but if you just continue to focus on growing the business and 3-month goals, 6-month goals, and 12-month goals. I mean, 5-year plans are, you go to these venture guys, say, well, let me see your 5-year numbers. I go, sure. Good luck with that. Oh, you're going to do a $500 million in sales? Sure, it's no problem. It's a $25 billion market. Right? Why wouldn't it? So here's some things. So 3 main qualities really for entrepreneurs and leaders, because entrepreneurs ultimately become leaders if their business is successful. So you have to have the confidence to make high risk reward decisions. And those are as simple as stroking a check for $250,000 for the tools to mold these plastic parts, right? But it also has to do with, for example, we're working on improvements to this. This is a bridge product to the Model 2, which will be coming out, in a few months. All right. And so high risk reward is, how much money do we put into this? Because if we upgrade it, we're going to have to spend another $150,000 on tooling and throw away $150,000 worth of tooling, and then scrap, $100,000 worth of parts. And then the reward is, how much are we going to get that money back in the time that we think the Model 2 is going to come out, because the Model 2 is going to obsolete the Model 1. So that's an example. That's not super high risk, but example of the kind of things you have to make those decisions, because the numbers are not going to really tell you the answer. They're going to guide you in the right direction. But at the end of the day, it really becomes, the CEO, the leaders, the entrepreneurs, gut decision. And one of the key things about decisions is that you really have to continually audit your decision-making process. You know, it's easy to say, oh, that decision didn't work out because of this, this, and this. But generally, it's because you made the decision, right? So you waited for more information. Was there more information available? Did you need some input? And sometimes, you know, sometimes it's as simple as saying, what are all the things that I don't know and I cannot know about making this decision? And think about those. If all of those go in the wrong direction, what would happen with the decision? I think you have to always think about the negatives versus the positives. But really, the unknowns is what trips you up. If you make a logical decision maker, not an emotional decision maker, and you have as much good data as you can, you should be able to make good decisions. But sometimes things go against you. Second is the humility to know that the success of your decisions depends on the creative reworking by the team. You must empower them, trust them, build their confidence, and give away some power and control. And you know, I'm a little bit of a control freak, but you know, over the years I've done a pretty good job of trying to manage that. And the control is more about, in the early stages of business, you have to have control because you have to make sure that your vision, because it's your vision, it's not your fifth employee's vision, it's your vision, that everybody understands that and why that's so important and why that's so critical. Now, you still need to, you know, get feedback from them and get creative working so that vision can change a little, but you have to be just laser focused on that vision because that's, if you don't, you're going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to be hard to raise money, and it's just going to be a real problem in trying to make the business a success. And then third is to clearly communicate the vision, you know, ground rules and values. Values are probably the single largest reason why I terminate people. You know, other than theft and lying. I mean, I spent a lot of time in the turnaround business fixing troubled companies, and I would always say, like I moved an aerospace business down here in 1992. We sold it to Vickers, who then sold it to Eaton. It's up on Cross County Road called Eaton Aerospace. We make hydraulic pumps and motors and flight control systems for everything from Patriot missiles and torpedoes to Saturn launch vehicles. So pretty cool business. But we moved it from upstate New York, and I got all 350 employees together the first day that I took the company over, and I said, look, I said, I'm here to fix this company, and the number one ground rule is you can't lie to me, because we need to know what the truth is. The first person that lies to me, or if you lie to me, you get fired, right? And, you know, within about a week, probably 100 people had left, none of their own volition. I said, look, I explained it to you. You know, don't tell me. If you don't know the answer, that's okay. But don't tell me the answer is X. That's why, because we don't have time to fool with it. And in a startup, you know, where you have cash burn, you don't have time to fool with that either. So values are pretty important. You know, ground rules, you know, that's not like you got to be here today, you got to leave at 5. But it's really how you communicate with each other. And that's the basis. Having a effective set, but simple set of ground rules is the way that you then evaluate, you know, whether the values are compatible. Because again, 50%, if 50% of the hires work out, you know, you're doing great. So let's do it all over again. Sure, why not? So much fun the last time. But the key thing, and this all gets back to the audit again. What made it work or not? Is it luck? Is timing? Some kind of secret recipe that you have? But again, you got to learn from your mistakes. And this is really the most painful thing. I mean, this is what you think about at 3 o'clock in the morning when you wake up, and you just think about, you know, I am such a miserable person. You know, I just can't get this stuff done. It just, you know. So that's the kind of time you should get out of bed and write stuff down and say, well, I'm not really such a bad person. But learning from your mistakes is the hard thing. So things to read, tips here. Fabulous book called Disciplined Entrepreneurship by Bill L.A., MIT Press. The Hard Thing About Hard Things, Ben Horowitz, is with Horowitz and Anderson, or Anderson and Horowitz, one of the big VC firms. Pretty interesting book. Try and at least look at the journal every day. TechCrunch, definitely every day. HBR is it's gotten a lot better than it was. You know, probably 10 years ago it was pretty stodgy, but there's a lot of good things in it these days. Some of them, you know, for much larger companies, but there's usually, you know, some nuggets you can get, and they've also done something smart. They actually, in the front of the book now, there's a summary of each of the articles, so you can read the summary and see if it's going to be helpful. And if it's good, then you read the whole thing. That's it. Q&A?
You were thorough.
I'm Laura Camacho. My thing is communication. So with that is replacing the big water heater, right?
Right.
In the house. So if I'm building a house, how do I know about it? I mean, are you communicating with the consumer or just with the retailers?
So we started with retail, arguably a little bit faster than we wanted to. But when Lowe's says we want you in all the stores, it's hard to say, yeah, can I come back next year? Yeah. And that has been a challenge for us. Arguably, that was going to be the way to and it's working okay. It's just the big box retail space is a little more complex to navigate through as a new company than it could be. But they're great guys, and great guys and girls, and they continue to support us and like our product. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on new construction, multifamily, and residential, and then the groups that influence them, like MEPs, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineers. So, for example, take a company like Equity Residential, big, multifamily developer. They have architects that design the buildings, and they hire these MEPs to figure out where the pipes go and the electrical wiring is going and stuff like that. So, and then those MEPs deliver a set of specifications that, in this particular case, plumbing or HVAC contractors bid on. So ideally, you get specified in. The home builders, we're working with Lennar and Pulte and the usual list of suspects on that. And they may offer it as an option, but if you think about it, it's one of the only products in the building space anyway that actually has value for the builder because they save space and they save money, but for the consumer, this thing saves 40% on your energy bill related to heating and water, which is 12 to 18% of your total energy bill, but you get endless hot water. And then you get all the connectivity features and stuff like that. You get a tank that doesn't leak. We think it's going to be, based on initial response, it's going to be pretty easy to spec in. We're not focused, so there's 9 million water heaters sold a year in the United States, about 1.5 million for new construction and the other half for replacement. And they last anywhere, depending where you live, from 5 to 12 years, basically depending on what kind of minerals are in the water. So we're not focused on the emergency replacement market yet. What we're going to do, though, is because the data is pretty available, is we're going to do targeted direct marketing to people, basically to developments. So, for example, like in Orlando Central Florida has the shortest life of any tanks. Literally, it's like 5 years. So you can find out when the Seacrest development was built in 2011, and so you do a direct mail piece to them, and you say, here's your water heaters in Florida last 5 years, and arguably yours is going to fail pretty soon, and so here's a 20% off coupon, and go to our website, plug in your zip code, and here's our list of installers. So that's how we're going to approach the sort of the B2C part of it, and then when we see how those goes, then we'll spend more, and then the HVAC installers will also be available. So if you call a plumber, you're probably not going to hear about us, but if you call an HVAC professional, then you probably will. And that's an interesting product channel for us as well, because again, they're better trained. They have both licenses, plumbing and electrical, under the same roof. They like new technology, but they're also able to sell. Plumbers rarely come unless there's a problem, right? But HVAC guys are coming in to check your filters. So when they come in, and if you think about your typical HVAC person, I mean, they come dressed in a uniform. They just look more professional than your average plumber. And I'm not trying to denigrate the plumbers, especially since this is going on the website. Love plumbers. But want to be a plumber. But the HVAC guys, when they come in to change your air filter or something like that, they might say, hey, we've got this new water. Would you like more hot water out of your existing tank? Is that a problem for you? If it is, then we got one of these things that we can put them in for $500. So it's a very proactive selling channel as opposed to being reactive.
And you're outsourcing all that, I'm guessing.
Most of it, yeah. Yeah, we have a direct sales force that we're building now.
Cool. Very good.
So what size home is one unit appropriate for?
So,
if you're willing to do the 220 volts.
yeah, so technically, the inputs are, since we're engineers around here, the incoming water temperature. So Florida's incoming water temperature averages like 75 degrees. Minnesota's in the winter is 50, something like that. How much hot water you want at a given time? How many gallons per minute? So this one, for example, I've got one of these in the outdoor shower where this whole thing started. I didn't tell you that story. So I was building an outdoor shower. I live out on Sullivan's. Wanted an tankless electric hot water heater because my hot water heater was way on the other side of the house. I didn't want about 150 feet of piping, so I go to Ferguson, the plumbing wholesaler, and I said, I want to buy a tankless electric water heater. And the guy said, I'm not going to sell you one. Why is that? Are you going to bring it back? Why would I bring it back? Because it's going to fail. Why would it fail? You know, do the 20 questions. I walk out of there. Hey, here's a problem statement. I'm looking for something to do. So this is what caused the invention. So so I've got one of these outside with a high flow shower head, like 2.25 gallon a minute, and I've got all the hot water I can stand. So around here, if you wanted to take only one shower at a time, one of these could do a whole house. If you want to do multiple showers at a time, then you need two. If you're way in Minnesota, now the Model 2 is going to be twice as powerful, so for most of the country, you're only going to need one.
So obviously when you raise capital, the big benefit is you get money in your bank account. But what are some other benefits for capital partners? Like, are you choosy about your capital partners, or is it the people who've got the money are willing to
So
invest?
money's fungible, right? Money from you is the same as money from you, other than that Yankee money that I talked about, which is bad, but I'll take some of that anyway. But ideally what you want is, well, so a couple things happen. Now you have a board. We had a board before, but we didn't really get. But now you have a board, and so, and those individuals have connections and ideas and concepts and things like that. So ideally, if you had two firms, let's leave individuals aside, if you had two firms that were going to offer you the same terms and conditions, you would want to pick the one that that is really going to help you grow your business. And that can be from anything to strategic introductions to, hey, you know, I was an entrepreneur before, I've been through this before, or, you know, we've got two portfolio companies that that have similar problems, and here's how they solve them. So it's really, and ultimately, that's really more important than the money. I mean, you got to have the money to keep the doors open, but it's really more important because, and they have to share your vision for the company. The group that we have, the Wave Equity Partners, is great. I've known actually one of the managing directors for a while, and actually to talk about how they can help us. They have two portfolio companies. One sells software as a service, and the other one makes really high quality insulating material, basically to move medicines around the country. A lot of stuff has to be frozen or kept at a certain temperature, or it spoils. And they use a company which we've hired called Reveneer, which is they've got this really amazing model about how to take the sales funnel and optimize the outcome of it and collect data. You know, one of the problems with sales, and sort of gets back to people, is you know, if we all go on a similar sales call, we're all going to have different call reports if you fill out call reports. And so from a management perspective, that's a nightmare, right? Like, well, is it good? Is it bad? Why did, you know, Jerry think it was good and Jack thought it was bad? I don't really get all this. So they're very data driven, which helps you then do target marketing and target selling. But what they do is they bring it down to the point where they hand it off to you, but they're already qualifying all the sales, and basically it becomes a solution sale at that point. You already know what the problem is, you know what the opportunity is, you can deliver it, and that, so it's a demo. Maybe we go on site and bring some water heaters, maybe we have a call, maybe we talk to the MEPs and stuff like that. So we're actually outsourcing that whole process. So Reveneer is going to provide our direct sales force to us, and then give us the funnel. So that's a perfect example of, I'd never even heard of these guys before, but I love the process. And just to give you an idea of who use it, I think we probably all heard of Morningstar, you know, that big, so they do and have always done 100% of Morningstar's data sales for them. So arguably Morningstar's a smart enough company, and I don't know, they must have thousands of employees. If they thought there was a better way to do it, they would do it. So, so that's a good example. Find the value in the team, but they also have to share your vision, because at some point, the next round of capital might not, you may get better terms with somebody else. Because most venture firms want to go in for at least another round. So we raised 5. Wave generally puts 10 to 15 into each company that they're into. So arguably we've got some dry powder, potential dry powder with them, but we may get better terms from someone else. Terms and/or opportunities, where they can make introductions.
We'll take a last question in there.
Jerry, actually 2 questions related, capital related. One is kind of the emotional side, which is, you described you're standing at the grill, you got this idea that, hey, I think there's this, but at some point you either quit your job, you mortgage the house, you're all in.
Done all of that.
You're all in. What triggers you to the confidence that the all-in point and what's going through your head to qualify an a bunch of different ideas to one that's actually worth being all in
Well, I think
on?
that gets, yeah, that's a great question. I think that gets back to, sort of gets into this area right here,
Yeah.
right? The first 4 points there. And it takes a lot of time to do. I can tell you with Blue Rhino, if I don't think I could have gone to anybody who was in the propane industry and say, hey, why don't we go start this business together? Because they were so focused on their business model. If I didn't know a guy who was already in that business, I probably would never have started Blue Rhino.
Gotcha.
And he would never start it without me because he said, look, I don't know how to get this stuff done. But I think you just have to get to the point where it seems like it makes sense. I mean, you've got to talk to a lot of people. You've got to,
Qualify the idea.
you got to say, would you buy this? And the thing is, you got to talk to other people than your friends because your friends are always going to be, yeah, sure, I'll buy that. Yeah. Well, how come you haven't bought it? Oh, that's not what I thought it was going to be. What's the other question?
So the other one's more math related, which is, you got this burn rate and break-even point. I mean, just looking back, how good were you on your estimate of
You're always terrible.
2x?
Always terrible.
Like double it?
It never even comes close to your expectations. Like I say to the team, I said, you can do anything. Time and money. Time and money. Yeah. We don't, but there's so limited time and limited money. I mean,
So any advice as to what you do different on figuring that whole thing out?
well, you just have to the easy answer is you raise more money. I mean, I'll give you an example. So the Lowe's rollout for us was supposed to be in all 1,720 stores in July of last year. Great, we're all ramped up, built a bunch of inventory. Didn't happen until January. Not because of us, just because of internal stuff with Lowe's, and they got late, and then they decided to do some of the stores in the holiday season, and they decided they did a whole reset of the water heater aisle. So when you go to any of the Lowe's stores now, you'll see our product on the wall, but that's all new. Water heater aisles just used to be, the inventory stacked up, and maybe there's a salesperson around. So they decided to merchandise it, if you will. And even the demo samples that we gave them was $80,000 or something like that. So that's $80,000 that's tied up for forever, but we thought we'd get a return on it pretty soon. So they sent all these things, these reset things, in these big wooden crates to their stores, and some of them just left them outside in the rain. So they had to get new ones, and they were waiting for the store personnel were supposed to do the whole reset. Well, when these things arrive like the week before Thanksgiving, all they're thinking about is Christmas. They're not going to reset the water heater aisle, even though people from corporate are yelling at them. I mean, so that's a perfect example of, we were so cranked up and ready to go. And that was the time to do it because you could get a better time than January because you could really get more time for the salespeople thinking about hardware, appliances and things like that, because that tends to be a slow season. More appliances are sold in the winter months.
Thank you all for
Sure.
coming out. I guess, Jerry, you're on for the 2-3 minutes. The one question I had in my mind is, you've been kind of entrepreneurial all along. You've just done a lot of things. It tends to, what I've seen of people who don't stray too far from their core, but yet you've done totally different things. Like the hot water from heat works is just so different. From putting propane cylinders. And the relationships are you had to establish a whole new set of relationships and that kind of thing. What goes into that? I mean, instead of leveraging what you already knew, you just kind of did an about face and kind of, went. So I'm curious. So you just increase your risk profile. You're completely exposed as opposed to some entrepreneurs who stay. So I know groups in North Carolina who just stay in the medical device business. They sell one, they get the team. Go around, screw around for 6 months, have a blast, and come back together. The same team comes back, does it again, dump it. It's just become a fun. And you just,
Well, that's a good question. So, first of all, we just crushed it so much with Blue Rhino, there was nothing else to do in the propane business. Right?
Crushed
Crushed
to
it.
have.
Yeah. But they're two totally different businesses. I mean, the Blue Rhino was a single focus, single problem solving product with multiple entities like the grill manufacturer and the big box retailers that could see the problem and could see that this was a solution to it. And we're agnostic as to cost. And one of the things you probably should have done at Blue Rhino was go in and say, I think they retail at $11.95. You probably should have said it's a $15 thing, but don't make the price too high, right? But it turns out that people are agnostic to the price relative to that. I mean, you can go to a convenience store and get a Blue Rhino exchange for $20, or you can go down the street to Home Depot and it's $15. It's the same product. The HeatWorks one took a lot of soul searching because, again, with my experience in businesses, is when you've got big established competitors, because technically they're, if you're heating water, we're in competition. They tend not to, and this has been validated, tend not want to think anything different than the way they're doing. They want incremental cost reductions every month and things like that in their product. So when you bring them a new technology, they want to think about it for a long time. And so it was really much more of a leap of faith with HeatWorks that convincing myself, again, auditing the process, that this really had a lot of applications and you really could revolutionize it, not just because it worked better, but there was use cases that people would say, I want a HeatWorks instead of a Ream or something like that. So different. I would say that that I would not have started HeatWorks if I'd thought about this 20 years ago. I probably wouldn't have taken the leap that I have now because I probably didn't have the breadth of business experience to really understand all the barriers that we're facing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think to your point though, but there are people that make great careers, whether it's electronics or medical, and they just, and they're in that space and they have all the connections and, I aspire to that someday. Not medical devices, but being in the same field. Yeah. You'd have to meet a whole new group of people in every industry you go to. So.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks everybody.
Very insightful, and just like as Jerry said, the video is live on Monday, and the PowerPoint will be on there as well, so you can kind of go back and just kind of see how you're tracking to some of these points on the Fridays of the Court on the site. So certainly appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and if you have any questions, if you don't know where to find me, Ernest or Kristen or Ellie do. So thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.